Pros returning to college. You heard that right. That might just be the end of everything.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came step by, thank you for Locked On Cougs, your first listen of the day, as do each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. Hit subscribe down below. You help the show grow and bring the latest to Cougars every single day. If you want to comment down below and don't know what to say, tell us if a pizza is a pie. It's a question of the day for you out there. Bringing that back for football season. That might confuse you a little bit. This college football, pro football returner thing is a lot more confusing, bluntly. I don't know about what's happening there and kind of what's happening around Houston in the first segment. Second segment, we'll have some how those questions tie into Houston still. And last segment, we'll talk some about the Ed Oliver story. And I guess this is the part where I will say, before we can get to that part of the show, Ed Oliver, extreme condolences to the Oliver family and everything surrounding that. There's no real way to do justice and expressing sympathies, but we're going to do the best we can. And trying to transition from that to the first segment about pros in college sports, I guess there's not a whole lot to really do that well, but the courts have made some rulings and people are pushing them in ways that are literally bringing people from like the Cleveland Browns back to college football. On Friday, the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals paused the nationwide ruling that high school 2022 players will be eligible in the 26-7 school year. If you've been living under a rock, haven't paid attention, you don't remember what had happened was there was a ruling that players now get 5 years of eligibility, but the high school class of 2022 that had finished eligibility in 2026 did not get that granted to them. There was a ruling then of an injunction in Colorado that it did, and then there was a ruling that actually, if your name was not on a lawsuit, then it didn't, and this is back and forth. Houston gets hit by this in the basketball sense because Kendall Weaver has signed with Houston. If he's eligible to play, he'll be he'll probably be 6th or 7th man, but he'll be the 14th roster spot because he'll be just added, right? So Houston is paying attention to that. You should too. There's been some chaos. I am wagering that chaos we saw by the time basketball season comes around, like that's October. You put your roster together. Football's more pressing because we're in literally week 0 as of today. I dropped my pen, but we're in week 0 as of today, and that feels seismic. You're adding players to play this weekend. That's crazy. And that's what people are trying to do, right? The injunctions, the merits, the things are going back and forth. They're going player by player, state by state now. And that is interesting in shifting things after Friday. This could all be changed by the end of Workday Tuesday. EOD Tuesday could change. Who knows when things shift and change. But as of today, there is not recording this podcast, there's not officially a national 5th year for high school 2022s. I feel some sympathy for them because folks that were redshirted in 2022 have a 5th year. Folks that come after them will get a 5th year. Folks from before them had the COVID year and all of that. The big story over the weekend tied to this was amidst all of that happening, LSU is about to sign a professional level tight end. Tight end Dae'Quan Wright played at Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin. He has been on the Cleveland Browns all summer, played preseason games for the Cleveland Browns, and Adam Schefter reported that he got waived over the weekend. And the immediate jump was that LSU will be signing him if he clears waivers. At this point in the process, my understanding is with the NFL that if he were to sign off of the waiver wire with an NFL team, he, for his own insurance policies, gets onto their 53-man roster. That's a player protection, but that's the way it would work. So teams would have to value him as a 53-man roster signee at this point, not just I think he's all right. So we'll see if the Browns waived him, though. That's not so good, right? LSU has become a favorite to pick him up, though, because he also put his name in the transfer portal. And I don't just mean like kind of a favorite. I mean like Rosenhaus Sports, the agency he's associated with, was tweeting out pictures of him in LSU gears, right? This is not just like random at all. This is very much the way things are going, unless someone were to sign him off the waiver wire and put him on their 53-man roster. There's only a couple big hurdles for LSU in this. One is financial. I mean, no one has bottomless pockets technically, and at this point in the season, they play Clemson fairly soon. It sounds like, or I don't know. Moscano has it all covered. Moscona has it. I always get that wrong. Moscona has it all covered over at Locked On LSU. Actually, a really great show, but it sounds like part of that deal is if he can transfer anywhere, why would he go to LSU if they have, if they don't necessarily have the most money because their rosters are pretty expensive? Is it realistic that they have more money for somebody else? That's all that all the things right there, right? And frankly, would LSU go find a bunch of more money from donors who've already paid a bunch of money for an LSU Lane Kiffin roster when they have an All-American tight end on the roster and Trey'Dez Green? Remember him from the bowl game last year? He's really good, right? This is not an SEC show. It's not an LSU show. I will say that does seem like an actual pitfall, but I wonder if the answer is, hey, you get them on campus and figure it out, because LSU folks tend to find money in their cushions or whatever, right? Like they figure it out. The other rule is an interesting SEC rule in that there's some bar or barrier on SEC to SEC transfers that would have been passed after the transfer portal window in January. And there'd probably need to be a court case about, could he retroactively, because he would have transferred back then, could he retroactively transfer now under the old rules? Otherwise, internally, he'd have to, I don't know, sit out, or I don't know, something about SEC to SEC transfer. The biggest issue in all of this is the guy's had a pro contract. He's played NFL preseason football games and just wasn't quite good enough. And frankly, we'll see if the waiver thing goes through like it's supposed to. I wonder, had he had not had all this LSU smoke, if he would have gotten picked up off the waiver wire somewhere else. And further, there's practice squad guys and this, that, and the third. And this guy was an NFL football player. And this guy was an NFL football player, and he is going back to play college football at apparently LSU for Lane Kiffin. So if you did not dislike that guy or that place enough, they just keep adding reasons because they're adding NFL players. Now, I will say again, sympathies for some of these high school 2022 guys who kind of got stuck as the lone class without the fifth year, right? I'm not saying that shouldn't have happened or whatever. I am maintaining my stance since the 5-5 got passed back when it did. This could have all been avoided. All of this confusion could have been avoided. Every single lawsuit basically could have been avoided had they just simply grandfathered in the high school 2022 kids instead of excluding them. And it didn't make sense to me when they did it. You can go back to the catalog. I'm consistent there. It just doesn't. Further, they've applied blanket rulings much more suddenly about eligibility too. Recently, the COVID pandemic, and they gave blanket COVID years to all those folks. I mean, this is not like crazy chaos, right? This is not like the only time this kind of a thing would have ever happened in college sports. And now they're going through a bunch of court cases and rigmarole, and everyone's paying money. And the biggest winner seems to be billable hours, frankly. Like, no one's really winning in this outside of some attorneys. It's really, really crazy. It's really, and college sports is seismically changing, because what I'm telling you right now, this is predictions from Parker Ainsworth, predictions from Paints Takes. I really and sincerely don't know how, if you let a kid play in college football this fall after he played an offseason in the NFL, a full offseason at that, we're at the end of August, folks. If you let him play in college football this fall after signing contracts and playing the NFL and all of that, what keeps anyone else from doing that within their eligibility window later? What keeps a guy who goes pro after 3 years of college football from, this isn't it, I need to go back to school, this isn't what I wanted, and going back mid-season? What, legally speaking, what are the differences? What keeps that from happening? Because you need it codified. Because if anything has been proven by these stupid cases, it's if it's not codified, it's going to get tested. When it gets tested, the NCAA continues to lose. I I don't know how he got here, and that's in college football. In basketball, where you can go pro after 1 year, there's a whole litany of opportunities for guys to want to go back after that year, right? And this is again where the things just need to be codified. Speaking of codified, set in stone, rules made, Houston is not closing the door on these kinds of things themselves necessarily, not quite pros, but familiar faces. And we'll get into that, what that looks like in a second. But first, today's was brought to you by our buddies over at Odoo. Because look, putting together businesses, gotta make sure that things run smoothly. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never really designed to work together. One app for accounting, one for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them seems to actually be able to talk to one another. It's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform, from sales and accounting to inventory and marketing. Everything works in one place. Odoo is a platform to manage, grow, and scale your business. The best organizations know that success is not just about talent, it's about having everyone working toward the same goal. That's true in sports and just like it is in business. Now, look, we just talked about people adding pros back to their roster. You can add pros to your roster without any crazy rule breaking or bending. And you can add pro appliances, pro applications, pro functionality to your roster without having any of the same kind of question marks because you use Odoo. Great organizations win because operations matter. That's why you should get Odoo. Try it for free today at odoo.com/locked on. That's Odoo, ODOO.com/locked on. Here it is. It's Parker Egg bringing you the question of the day. Pizza, is it a pie? Tell me down below. Help the show grow. Look, we mentioned before that there was questions about bringing back pros. It's a whole different deal to me if the kid has not signed or even tried to really earnestly go pro, like Ethan Sanchez. End of last week, we saw Ethan Sanchez and his representation formally enter the transfer portal. That was because at the time, that was folks were filing injunctions to get the ability to go into the transfer portal and have the ability to transfer if they were granted a fifth year because of roster limits and so on and so forth. And that led to a little bit of snooping on my end, like, what's he thinking? What's he, whatever. And this is very much, I don't know, this is not reporting. I don't do that kind of thing, but this is a lot more of like it feels like, it seems like if granted a fifth year, Ethan would prefer to go back to Houston. And I think that that's a fair way to look about it. Now, we'll see if there's some crazy high bidder that needs a kicker. Power to you, kiddo. I'm not going to tell you now to get your money, right? I will say that based on the rulings on Friday, and who knows what happens this week, and every single day seems something different. Who knows where we're at by the time we finally kick off games. But adding a kicker that is familiar with the team feels like the easiest last second add, right? Because there's no stunts or coverages or routes or concept. It is snap, hold, kick, boom. And it's the same people, the same rhythm, practice schedules. You've already been in the program. Those kinds of things make a lot of sense. It makes total sense to be a last second add functionally, right? I will say that it does make me feel a little bit bad for Jonathan Demas. Does sound like he was kicker one last week and had apparently won the spot, and I imagine he'll be the kicker moving forward. Kicker was basically the only undecided position in the starting lineup to come into camp, and Jonathan Demas won that position from Westfield High School. Coles ranks kickers, and he was the 8th ranked kicker in the class of 2023. He was an all-state punter in 2024 as well, and he was all-district special teams person in 2023. Like he's not just some random kid that can get, like, he's a good kicker, right? And it was apparently his job. But I think if Ethan Sanchez were to become available and it were to be clear and those kind of things, he'd probably get the job and come back. Remember, Sanchez had a career long of 52. He hit the second most field goals in a season for a Houston Cougar. He had walk-offs, he had big-time clutch one. I mean, there's basically one game that people think when they think of like the bad side of Ethan Sanchez. The rest of the season was pretty strong, including winning more games than he lost as a kicker. That's important, right? Um, I think most folks also liked the presence of Ethan Sanchez. He did the Cristiano Ronaldo celebration. He was kind of a very kickery looking kicker, so to speak. I think all of that would come with Jonathan Demas if that was the route people went or that route Houston went. People would also fall in love with him if he started making his kicks right and all. Like that would be a very easy transition. They just already have that established with Ethan Sanchez. We called him the Sanchez throughout the show, throughout the season last year on this show, actually, because he was a very important part of what Houston did as a football program. He had 5 field goals in a game one time. I mean, like he was an important part of the game. Um, I do think though that because both a kicker is relatively easy to add and um, because of the wait and see attitude from Willie Fritz, this is not happening. I wouldn't gamble on it happening before before kickoff with Oregon State. Um, I just I don't think I you can maybe see it happening before maybe Tech, or do you have it happen after Tech? So you get a week to get ready for Georgia Southern, and they get to play some more Big 12 football. We'll see when the jump on that happens if it can happen. It does. I mean, sound like there's a chance Ethan Sanchez is back in school. Just make sure that he's eligible from a playing and being in school perspective this fall. We'll see. We'll see. I can't get confirmation quite yet on that. And I frankly had one person ask why I was asking. That was not a great feeling. Um, Look, I think though that Willie's attitude tells you a lot, both from a confidence perspective and just with the programming's perspective. Um, Willie said when asked about this at the start of fall camp, when the ruling had just happened a couple days prior, that he was very much in a wait and see kind of mode, and they were going to, as a staff, wait and see how this thing rolled out. Now we're about 2 weeks away. I mean, just under 2 weeks away from the first game, and they're still waiting to see. Things continue to change. I think that means it's probably not going to happen at positions outside of kicker. If I were being a gambling person on it, or if I were going to the sports book on this one, I would say if Houston adds anyone, it is a kicker. But I don't think that means that the kicker is out of the realm of possibility. Again, it's an easy position to add. You have an experienced one who understands your program. From a dollars and cents perspective, it's not like the most expensive position on the field to add, although you probably would have to if he was open to the transfer. If he could really transfer anywhere, you probably would have to find something to pay him, right? If he, we should back up on that. If the ruling is that Sanchez can come back, but he can't transfer, the bidding is closed, really. I mean, there's some goodwill in handing the kid the things he's owed, but the bidding should not be open market bidding in an NIL market or anything like that. I mean, he can't go anywhere else, and he can't transfer and play next year. Or anything. Like this is it. So that would present some interesting problems, questions more on that. I do think though that that's the one ad, and I think that honestly that means people get kind of like, well, what about Stephon Boogie Johnson? What about? And I just think that they feel. I mean, there is when you ask anyone involved in the program, there is a real strong, deserved confidence in where they're at. That means they're not going to go get anyone just say getting anyone. They're just not. And they're going to only add where they feel like they really need to add. And that's not to say that there aren't players out there that are really good to be gotten. I just don't think they're bringing them back to Houston. I mean, they've squared up with Georgia Southern in a couple months, and a little over a month. And we found out who their starting quarterback was over the weekend. It's weirdly Max Johnson, who's also got a Texas A&M tie-in. Georgia Southern already has a Clay Helton tie-in. Clay Helton, son of Kim Helton. There's lots of weirdness around that matchup already, but I guess you could see some weirdness. And Houston really got a new kicker or something. We'll see more as we get there. Last but not least, I said I want to touch on the Ed Oliver story, and that's what we're gonna do next. And there's no easy segue into that. But before we get there, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at FanDuel, because baseball fans, if you thought you know or think you know who's hitting a home run today, FanDuel is giving you a chance for free to call your shot at daily dingers. Easy to play. Make your pick a free pick for who you think is going to hit a home run in their game. And if you're right, you get a free profit boost to use on your next bet at for a chance at extra winnings. Now, what's best of all is to make a pick every day throughout the MLB season. Just go to FanDuel.com, look up Daily Dingers, say, hey, Jordan Alvarez hits a lot of home runs. You're going to go find Jordan Alvarez. Think he's going to hit a home run. Then when he's going to run, you get free extra thing to throw on, a profit boost to throw onto your next bet. Really simple, easy to use. You can use it every single day the rest of Major League Baseball season. So if you're ready to play your game today, join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences at FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Park Rangers Locked on Cougs here. Thank you all for making Locked on Cougs your first listen today and making Locked on Sports Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network on the planet Earth. All right, the Ed Oliver story is hard to talk about, and it probably deserves some sort of warning about this. But if you didn't pay attention to NFL football or storylines over the weekend or just anything social media related, good for you, frankly. But the story about Ed Oliver slowly and quickly became a media story, more so than an Ed Oliver story. And over the weekend, I'll call him Twitter person in the Bills social media sphere, not like tied to the team, anything like that, but broke the story about Ed Oliver, who lost his 2-year-old son, Ed Oliver III, over the summer, end of June, I want to say, at the family's home in a drowning incident. And the family has been very private about it. And it's been, I cannot imagine the kind of pain and frankly, all of the negative emotions and everything tied to that, and the toll, and the families going through the whole thing for going on 2 months now. And this became slightly tangentially tied to football because of, Ed Oliver not showing up to some of the Buffalo Bills things this offseason. Ed Oliver, obviously famous Houston Cougar. Like on a small Mount Rushmore of Houston Cougars. I don't know where you place him on your list. You talk about most impactful non-quarterbacks. He's got to be near the top, if not the top. 3-time All-American, all those kind of, he was the deal, right? Frankly, there were a lot of people who were watching Cougar football in the teens who might call him their favorite Houston Cougar. He was dominant, exciting to watch, made impact plays. And there was also people that thought, the way that things went down with him and Major at the end didn't rub them the right way, and that jacket's out there floating around somewhere. I don't whatever. But that's not important right now. What's important is that a former Houston Cougar has had an incredibly challenging summer, and they were being very private about it. And the Bills had kind of agreed with that privacy and had not really put out why Ed Oliver was not there. And the timeline matters some. Oliver did not report to camp in July. This happened at the end of June. And now we're near the end of August, and it's coming to light through this Twitter Tony Farmer connection, right? And Tony Farmer, on I think it was late Friday night, acts like he discovered it, and tweets it out. And the lack of previous reporting apparently was somewhat intentional. A lot of Bills media folks have come and said, hey, we all kind of knew about this. We just didn't feel like it was right to talk about it. The Oliver family hasn't publicly talked about it. Why would we? And that's, I think, where this story took a turn. It's not that this Tony Farmer social media account was the first to figure this out. I quickly texted, we have Locked On Bills Hit and Locked On Bills, and they're like, one of the two was like, yeah, I heard about it, but I'm not going to be the first one to break that story. That's awful, right? It just means the folks covering the team kind of had an understanding as to why Ed wasn't there, but they weren't going to rush to, write a story up about it. And I think that's really kind of what's in, Ed Oliver was a very private person. He enjoys the quieter parts of life, the countryside. He rides horses and that kind of stuff. And he is an extremely good football player and thus gets thrust into the public light and the public figure. And frankly, one of the things that makes him a perfect Buffalo Bill is that it's a big time football team with a great fan following and all that, but it's not like the glitz and glam of the Cowboys or Los Angeles or Chicago, or like it is very much a town that Ed Oliver would appreciate. And I think is part of the beauty of that. Um, but that public, whatever level of fame that Ed Oliver had as a Pro Bowl defensive lineman is something he chose to pursue and his talents led him towards. It's not something that the rest of his family opted for, and it's really not something that his no longer with us son opted for. That's all, much more painful and private for them, and is, now out there, and that's a whole different deal. This isn't this kind of story about like someone doing something wrong or someone doing something sketchy or scandalous. This is a tragedy. This is a personal, private tragedy, and um, with the way it got tweeted out about over the weekend and things like that, it became, it, it became the story on journalism because all these folks were saying they had it, and this other guy said it was his turn to tweet out. The Bills, for what it's worth, confirmed over the weekend with kind of their own black and white solemn post about being with thoughts and prayers with Ed Oliver at this time and the family at this time, or whatever, right? Um, but I think when you start looking at like the sensationalizing of the posts about it, or what words were and weren't chosen and whatever, it's all seeking for this social media person a lot of attention in a way, using this thing that just you can't you can't use for that. You just can't. And this idea of like, can you report something because it's been verified versus should you report something even if it's been verified? And the can you, I guess, if you got the facts right and whatever, that's one thing. There's a whole lot of back and this should not have been out over the weekend. Whenever Ed and family decided it was time to tell the story, because inevitably they have to at some point, which is another thing, right? Um, then that should have been the timeline. And instead they're dealing with it now. And I think what's interesting, Josh Allen's not a Cougar, so I don't mean to say this. I don't know which parents and Josh Allen are. I think he became a very likable figure in the story, though. When over the weekend, it's a preseason game over the weekend. Josh Allen, I think he barely played. I don't even suit it up actually. Kyle Allen's on the team though. Just Kyle Allen, he used to Cougar. Um, but Josh Allen took the time to address the media after the game, and Allen used the phrase over and over again that it made him very sad and very angry. Sad and angry about how this happened. And look, I generally speaking think there's some things about our athletes we need to know because you have kids looking up to these folks, and you have some level of private life have to become public because of that, or the nature of this, that, and the third, whatever. This is none of those things. And I think that Allen kind of spoke to that kind of an anger. Like, listen, you guys have so much access to pro athletes' lives. This was the epitome of needed to stay private. It should have stayed private. And it doesn't seem like anyone in the Bills organization was questioning the amount of time that Oliver was taking. I don't know why this had to come out this other way. And so I want to say, I guess I'm in part, I want to say I'm in part thankful that so many people saw how wrong this was. Like in one weird way, that almost confirms that like there is some good in this talking about sports business anyway, right? That so many people saw how wrong this was so quickly. It also, I think, though, made me incredibly sad that like, the story itself is truly awfully sad. And Oliver lost a 2-year-old son in a way that is apparently completely an accident, and a truly awful one to have happen at that. Yeah, like I don't know, man. I got 3-year-old myself, and that'd be really hard. And I also think it's, I don't know, just awful, just awful. And it does somewhat hit home with a lot of us. We cheered for Ed Oliver for the 3 years he was at Houston. Uh, True, like, highlight of life moments when he's playing at hosting Louisville and all that kind of stuff. I mean, like, truly brought so much happiness to so many Cougar fans. And now he's at this really dark time, and, you know, some turdball decides he's gonna run with it for some clicks on Twitter. I don't know, man. Look, I enjoy a good viral post much the next guy. I don't mean to sound holier than thou on a lot of things when it comes to social media. I hope they don't come off too much like that. This is different. This is different. I don't know. It just was. Bringing latest on Houston Cougars every single day. Speaking of being different, again, thoughts and prayers with the Ed Oliver and his family. No seamless transition. I just tried, but I couldn't even figure. More on the Houston Cougars later today and some bonus content and tomorrow. Yeah. Love you, Ed. Go Cougs.